The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my blog, Gary Hart, where you are encouraged to comment whether you agree with the author or not. And thanks to our friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we are syndicated coast to coast across the United States into 12 million additional households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten, and I am so pleased to introduce our first and only guest today, another fellow by the name of Gary. This is a former U.S. Senator, former presidential candidate, Gary Hart. Gary Hart has written a book called Under the Eagle's Wing, which is really a strategy for the United States to countermand the threat of global terrorism in the years ahead. A blueprint, if you will, for the next administration headed by whomever our next president may be, he or she may be. Senator Hart speaks from experience. He served on the United States Commission on National Security for the 21st century, which predicted the events of 9/11. Unfortunately, this was one of those government commissioned reports that apparently was shelved somewhere, probably at the Library of Congress. Nobody really paid much attention to it. Had they done so, perhaps they could have prepared for and obviated what actually happened on 9/11. He has had an inside look at how the United States has approached foreign policy and matters of national security. And in Under the Eagle's Wing, this experience and presents a national security strategy for that upcoming administration. I welcome Senator Gary Hart to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
It is our pleasure to have you here with us today. And do you believe, Senator Hart, had the 21st Century Commission's report been taken more seriously, the events of 9/11 may have not occurred?
I do, although there is disagreement even among our commission members. There were 14 of us, all with long records and experience in national security matters. But I strongly believe we could have made it a lot more difficult for the terrorists to attack us. But we simply, the warnings simply were not heeded by the new administration.
You are now involved as well with the American Security Project. So before we go any further on this, former U.S. Senator Gary Hart, could you enlighten us as to what the American Security Project is?
This is a group, a similar group actually, but this is a private organization formed about a year ago of retired senior military officers, former members of both Democratic and Republican administrations, former members of Congress, and some sitting members of Congress who, in a word, are trying to recreate a bipartisan, nonpartisan approach to national security, given the new realities of the 21st century, which include not only the threat of terrorism, but a lot of other non-military threats as well, including climate change, energy dependence, the threat of viral pandemics, and a variety of other new realities that we have to deal with.
Well, I don't want to focus too much on where we missed the boat prior to 9/11. I think it's more advantageous to all of us to explore what can be done in the future. So in your book, Under the Eagle's Wing, you have, as I suggested in the opening remarks, presented a blueprint for anyone to follow. Can you highlight to us what actually ought to be done in order to, if not ensure that there will not be further terrorist attacks, maybe minimize the exposure?
Well, I will do that, but I must say that I have to correct an impression given in your introduction that this is a book focused almost exclusively on the terrorist threat, and it is not. It really does broaden the definition of what security means in the 21st century, includes those realities, some of which I have mentioned, that do not lend themselves to a military solution, and emphasizes the need for, if you will, to globalize the security approach of the 21st century. But on the specific issue of the terrorist threat, I stress very much the need to integrate intelligence services among allied liberal democracies to train and equip our special forces and law enforcement agencies to deal with this threat from stateless nations or non-state actors, and to find out what the terrorist plans are before they occur. So it stresses the need for much more focus on unconventional warfare and for prevention rather than response.
So what does that exactly mean, former Senator Gary Hart, when you say unconventional warfare?
Well, we're used to wars of the 20th century in which great armies meet in the field. The wars we're fighting now are totally different from those. They're largely urbanized. They are against people who don't wear uniforms or are not organized in division strength military. They don't possess, by and large-scale weapons like artillery and air combat aircraft. They certainly don't have navies. This is a totally different kind of warfare. It is insurgency. It is what the military calls low intensity, and it's much, much different from most of the wars we fought in the 20th century.
So how do we as a nation adapt to that?
Well, I've already suggested some ways. We begin to integrate with our allies, with whom we have close security arrangements, our intelligence services. We can't, up until recent times, we didn't even get the CIA to talk to the FBI. We now need them both to talk to French security, German security, British security, and the security services of an awful lot of countries who also suffer from the terrorist threat, as well as we do. Share information, not put our secrets in a box, but be willing to share information we have in exchange for information they have, and then integrate in terms of training and equipping our special forces and law enforcement agencies